Welcome back, everybody, to Stuff That Matters Now. And today we are on a discovery, well, I'm on a discovery mission with Rodger Spillane. Good afternoon, Rodger.
Kia ora half.
Now, we're going to skip who you are and go to what we want to talk about. We might come back to that. Where are we, Rodger?
We're at Toyota New Zealand. We're at the head office, the National Customer Centre here in Palmerston North in the glorious Manawa 2. And we're sitting just off our atrium where on the way in we had a look at a cutaway Toyota Mirai hydrogen vehicle. And that's a good lead-in for us to talk about hydrogen.
That's why we're here today. Rodger, you're a nice guy, but I wouldn't talk to you otherwise. You know, I just want to suck your brains on this hydrogen thing. We will come back to you. Rodger, where do we start with this conversation? Because I'm dying to know more about hydrogen.
Okay, well, let's start with what hydrogen is and why it matters, the stuff that matters. Hydrogen's an abundant element. It's all around us in nature. It's in water, so a considerable part of you and me is hydrogen, not just hot air. In the context, we're talking about hydrogen here as an energy store, not an energy source. Hydrogen power is typically the use of hydrogen with a fuel cell to create electricity or through combustion. Toyota is currently focused on expanding the use of hydrogen fuel cell technologies as a means of decarbonisation in New Zealand, as a means of decarbonisation globally, in fact. So how you make your hydrogen then becomes really important. And our focus is around green hydrogen.
So our focus, meaning Toyota's focus?
Toyota's focus.
Yep.
And our focus today can be around the wider set. But New Zealand's in a really good position to take advantage of hydrogen energy because we have a high degree of production of renewable energy, 80, 85, capacity up to maybe 90%, and looking to close that gap of our electricity production is renewable. So when you're making hydrogen, green hydrogen, you're using water from a source, purified water from a source. You're using electricity from that renewable source, and you're combining the two for production of green hydrogen, which then provides an energy store that you can use, or we can use, in some of those harder to abate areas where we want to reduce our CO2 emissions, like heavy freight, like replacing diesel for generators and those kind of things. And there's some really cool applications that we'll get to talk about that Toyota and other parties in New Zealand have been involved with over a reasonable period of time. So how you make your hydrogen is really important. And for us, sourcing that hydrogen is a key part in making a difference in New Zealand in terms of sustainability and lowering carbon emissions.
So are there plants out there that make this hydrogen? Do I call it fuel?
Yep, call it fuel.
So are there plants out there that make the hydrogen fuel?
Absolutely. There's one down the road from us here in Palmerston North, just outside of the airport on Railway Road. Haringa have a refuelling station there that's one of 4 that they've opened, a network across New Zealand geared towards heavy freight. And their model is actually to produce hydrogen on the site. So they're literally pulling power from the grid. They've got water from the local supply. It's going through a purification process. Electrolysis then, so the combination of water and electricity. Electrolysis then gives them the hydrogen, which is then stored on site and available for trucks to be able to refuel on that site. So you're eliminating your transport costs. So they've got a very efficient production model, and they're offering some of the cheapest hydrogen in the world as a result of that model that they're applying here in New Zealand.
So if you are a cynic to all this green technology stuff, and you see it with memes and so forth in the States, where electric cars are being fueled by coal-powered electric stations, right? How do you respond to that? That cynic in me of going, so the electricity, because it's coming from 90% renewable, makes it greener. So you need to use electricity to create hydrogen?
Correct. That's right. Well, that's the model that the producers for the type of applications we're talking about are using. You can create hydrogen through a kind of industrial process, and that's typically used in other industrial kind of processes, and that's not the type of production that for transport and mobility that there's a focus around at the moment.
Okay.
So another example then, so for Toyota New Zealand, we've got three parts of our hydrogen business. We've got the vehicles, so the Toyota Mirai, like the one you saw outside. We've got generators, and then we've got the fuel cells themselves. So the Mirai and the generators, it's fuel cell technology that's effectively allowing that hydrogen fuel to be converted or to become electricity in order to provide motive power or some other sort of power. So that fuel cell itself can be used in the conversion of trucks or buses or in other applications, like in heavy freight, in order to take something that might be diesel powered and to turn it into something that's got a hydrogen fuel source. The benefit of that, which we haven't mentioned yet, so the benefit of that is that you've got zero tailpipe emissions. So when you're consuming hydrogen using a fuel cell to create electricity so your car can go, so you can switch on your generator and power your thing, you've got zero tailpipe emissions then. Your only emission is really a little bit of demineralised water. So if you're ever lucky enough to be following a hydrogen truck on the road, you will notice A, it looks like any other truck. B, it's very quiet. It's a very quiet running power, like EV, because effectively it's an electric motor and an electric battery that are providing that motive power. And C, you'll get maybe a little trail of water that you'll see coming out of the back or to the side as you follow it on the road. And that's the difference. So zero tailpipe emissions means that we're using that hydrogen energy store. So hydrogen is an energy store rather than energy source to reduce our CO2 emissions. We're using renewable power up front to create our hydrogen. We've got a good efficient process using the fuel cell to convert that hydrogen into an electrical output to make our thing work. And then we've got zero CO2 emissions at the tailpipe in order to be able to have a really good CO2 saving. And that's a big part of what motivates me in being part of this activity as Toyota's manager of our hydrogen program, our hydrogen projects, is the ability to make that kind of contribution and to see those partnerships come to fruition so that kind of thing is happening on a much wider scale than it is. And New Zealand's quite well placed. Over the last few years, we've really hit some key milestones and had some good successes at the beginning of our hydrogen journey in terms of that opportunity for decarbonisation.
So tell me about those milestones.
Well, firstly, back in 2018, there was a memorandum of understanding signed between the New Zealand government and the government of Japan. So we've been very fortunate in that governments and transitions between governments, we've had consistency that we've got a national view on that hydrogen is part of our energy and carbon emission reduction story. So we've got a good framework there that we're able to build on, and that allows companies to have some security around knowledge for their investment that kind of thing. We're also, if you're in Auckland as a listener, we've also got a hydrogen bus on the road in Auckland. Auckland Transport, a relatively early adopter in picking that up, and that was built by one of our key partners. That's part of the story that we'll continue on with, GBV, or Global Bus Ventures, and they're a business based out of Rolleston in Christchurch. They've got a really good engineering heart, experience in buses and in EV, and they've already picked up hydrogen conversion and to a really strong degree. So another milestone we would have would be the America's Cup. So Toyota New Zealand as a sponsor for the America's Cup, and so for the most recent America's Cup, we had the chase boats, the really fast boats that follow those big foiling catamarans that need to go at a similar speed for media or for the teams themselves. Those chase boats were hydrogen powered. So the first of those was for Emirates Team New Zealand, and I don't want to have one of those outside for you to have a look at. I'm sorry about that. The first of those, Chase Zero, was commissioned by Emirates Team New Zealand. GBV, other organisations, and Toyota really got together in order to make it happen and to get them on the water. And then because in the America's Cup, the winners have a strong say in how the rules were, it was an easy step that each of the teams and then the America's Cup organisation themselves took a chase boat for the event in October of last year in Barcelona. So that's a global showcase for it's not small scale because it's big stuff, but for little old New Zealand innovation and some good trusted technology from Toyota to be able to show what can be done in this kind of space. So that was a really good milestone, and that's been an important part of the journey.
And I think about that combination between the two. The America's Cup now are on these foils, achieving remarkable conversion of wind to speed. And then you've got, and Toyota has been a consistent sponsor for a long time of that. And then to dovetail in with this new energy source, I'm going, that's cool. So I didn't understand that. We've talked a lot about the heavy vehicles. Is this an option for cars coming through in the future?
Yep. So we've got a certain number of Toyota Mirai on the roads here in New Zealand now. One of the things that New Zealand's gearing for in terms of hydrogen adoption, and we talked about Haringa down the road in Palmerston North. They're also in Auckland, in Hamilton, and at Tauranga. We're building our infrastructure towards heavy freight and steering away from being too technical. But you fuel a truck, hydrogen's fueled at pressure, and the tanks hold the hydrogen at a certain initial pressure. So heavy freight refuels to 350 bar, and a smaller vehicle, a passenger vehicle like the Mirai, would refuel optimally to a higher pressure, which is 700 bar. So for heavy freight, we're building our network geared towards that because that's our biggest decarbonisation opportunity, and that's a good initial strategic choice. What we will see is the uptake of heavy freight lead, and what we would like to see is then the 700 bar, the higher pressure refuelling follow, so that a wider geography within New Zealand have access to be able to fuel a passenger vehicle to the fullest extent. We do have that as an option in Auckland, and we've got a small number of Toyota customers. Another milestone going back to 2022 was Toyota as a company transitioning to mobility, transitioning to become a mobility company. We set up a car share scheme with Mirai vehicles around a number of companies in Auckland as a trial. We called it the Hydrogen Project, and that's been really successful. So that took us to refueling those vehicles using a sister company of Toyota City Hop, so one of the car share companies in New Zealand. And those Mirai was shared amongst a number of companies, so that if you were at Saatchi & Saatchi's, the advertising agency, there was a Mirai there, and if you were part of the scheme, you could access that through your widget and go where you need to go. So that gave us an opportunity to trial Mirai in a way that was focused around a geography where there was the availability for us to refuel, refuel in Auckland. And what we're doing now with that scheme is we're kind of converting that scheme to a business-to-business lease. So you wouldn't be able to walk into a Toyota store in Invercargill and order Mirai. It's not on our price list. It's not available in that way. But we are making that vehicle available as the network and the ability to refuel kind of ramps up. And for the Mirai and for our generators, that's the other producer, one of the other main producers of hydrogen in New Zealand that we're using there. And that's a different type of production from what we talked about earlier. This is where a joint venture, Turapaki Trust, and Japanese corporation Obayashi formed a joint venture based at Mokai, where the trust has a geothermal power plant. And leveraging that plant, literally 200 metres down the road, is a hydrogen production facility. And they've got a 1.25 megawatt plant, very similar to what we're talking about. So you've got electricity, it hasn't travelled very far. You've got water out of local supply from geothermal, so it's renewable and it's like kind of farm to plate. You can kind of trace the
like I'm smiling because I worked with Turapaki 25 years ago when they were just getting going, and they were a little farming organisation, and they had 2 or 3 farms, and they were just getting into geothermal production of greenhouses and so I'm delighted to hear this has gone on.
No, they're a tremendous partner, and they've got a real sense of the stewardship of the land and a generational foresight in for their families as part of the family trust and their people going forward. So it's a really good fit for what they want to achieve. And so they're a supplier for us. So their production, they're a supplier of us for our generator, and for the refueling of Mirai for us in Auckland as well, and a really important partner. And they're also working through with us at the moment just around how we can use some of those other products and activities in other parts of the good work that the trust do, and a very substantial and well-run business. So there's good synergy there for us. So that's an important part of the landscape. Toyota's kind of organising idea at the moment is around let's go places, and transitioning to a mobility company, that's a really good fit. There's a lot of vision in that space, but one of the things in my role and for a lot of us is taking that.
Just come back.
Go.
This is my mobility thing.
Yes.
Where's that a deviation from where it's been?
Well, I suppose you could say at base, Toyota might be perceived as being a car company, but if we think about not that asset that you're sitting in order to travel, but what helps support your mobility from A to B, a car subscription would be like the Mirai, the hydrogen project, would be a good example of where it's a mobility scheme. You're not purchasing the vehicle, you're using the vehicle. Car ride, car share schemes are another good example of that. So it's those kind of things which enable people's mobility in a way that's different and new. Is the sense and the meaning of that.
That's a big shift.
Yeah, no, it is. And a lot of the automotive companies will be looking at what their their strategies, their ways of working are towards that. I'd like to think that Toyota in New Zealand has a number of advantages. We have our scale. We have really good support in terms of technology from Toyota overseas, Toyota in Japan. When I'm working with companies like GBV around, we haven't really talked around the truck yet, and I'm excited. My dad was a truck driver, and I'm excited by trucks, so I do want to get onto heavy freight. But when we're talking with companies like GBV around the fuel cell, using a fuel cell in a conversion process to take a truck from diesel to hydrogen, so it becomes a fuel cell electric vehicle, we've got a significant amount of support out of Japan, the hydrogen factory, Toyota's hydrogen factory. They don't make hydrogen there, they make the fuel cells. And it's a fascinating process. It's a very chemical process. You go in and you visit. It's a clean room environment, and the layering effectively of the cells to make up the units that become the fuel cell that then goes in a vehicle. There's a lot of precision and a lot of years, decades for Toyota and others of research and continuous improvement to get to the point where you've got a very reliable product that's very repeatable and works well in the market. So Toyota New Zealand are quite well supported and well placed in terms of that reliability of the technology that we can then bring here. Technology is only part of it. You've got to have the people as well.
Yep.
So if I summarise my job as anything, it's bringing the people and the technology together in order that we can make great things happen around hydrogen energy, hydrogen projects with a decarbonisation outcome.
So, because I was thinking this is following a similar path to diesel, where diesel started in trucks, and then when it first came to cars, it was pretty clunky, and then all of a sudden the diesel, because the diesel motor in cars once upon a time were very noisy, the performance was pretty average, and it would chuck out black smoke. That was a diesel car 30-something years ago, maybe 40 years ago. And then all of a sudden they become quiet and well, good performing, and then all of a sudden you couldn't tell, So this hydrogen movement is starting with the trucks and so forth first. Is that right?
Certainly in New Zealand, and I think that's our biggest opportunity. Hydrogen is a very good displacement for diesel combustion engines in a lot of the places where you might find those, in generators, in trucks, at a port in terms of the big straddle carriers you get that are lifting up the containers and moving around. So that, yes, you're right. You're right in identifying there. If I was picking, maybe taking a punt on what might be the place in the future, it's quite interesting. So I'll go to quite a number of events. I've started going to truck shows, which is brilliant. I was with some colleagues at the Japan Festival in Wellington last year with the Cutaway Mirai, and you just get to talk to so many people. And there really are a number of groups of people that have a perspective around hydrogen. Some people will be really knowledgeable and have done some research, and they'll be really keen on the nuts and bolts and the guts of the technology. Some people will simply be kind of intrigued, tell me more about this, and be looking to learn and increase their understanding there on the day. And then some people will have quite a strong perspective about hydrogen, how hydrogen sits versus EV, and what that kind of looks like. And my kind of take on that, and Toyota's approach on that as well, is that we see that we'll move to, or we support a kind of, you want to call it a multi-powertrain option going forward. So there's a place for EVs, there's a place for hydrogen, there's a place certainly for hybrid vehicles, which is doing a lot of the heavy lifting at the moment in terms of reducing our transport emissions. So you've got these kind of different different powertrains, and they've got different uses, and they're suited to different customer needs. So one of the important things as we go forward in terms of a transformation to reduce our carbon emissions is we don't leave people behind. If someone needs a vehicle, if someone's got a mobility need, we need to be able to find a solution that works for them in terms of a cost, but works for all of us in terms of that overall picture of reducing our carbon emissions. So we see the hydrogen piece as really favouring, in terms of heavy freight, and you might see that EVs and plug-in EVs, which is another important part of that transition, are a good displacement for petrol vehicles, for
Yep.
ICE vehicles,
Yep.
which we're seeing fewer and fewer of in terms of new sales. So that's maybe a bit of a picture going forward. I've talked myself to a point where I've forgotten your original question, but I'm sure I've answered it beautifully.
You have. Look, I was in Auckland recently and I hired a little Toyota car. And it took me a wee while to work out what it was. I was in a hurry picking it up in the morning, and I hop in this thing. I'm trying to work out how to get it started, but realise it was started, and it was an EV. It was a hybrid. And at the beginning of the day, I had 750 kilometres or something I could go, and by the end of the day, I had 780 kilometres, and I'm going, and they said I should fill it up before I bought it out. Well, it had used sort of 20 cents of fuel during the day. It was magic, this thing, and I'm going, I've got no idea how it worked, but round town it was just amazing, and I thought, well, I was just intrigued at how efficient this thing was. Amazing. And it was, and I think of all the steps it's taken to get to this state, and I thought, okay, this is a new category altogether. I mean, you guys come out with the Prius, I don't know how long ago.
2023, it was the year I started at Toyota New Zealand. We launched the Prius in, I think, September of 2003.
I was going to say, it's not
2003.
Yes.
Sorry.
What a remarkable vehicle that's been. It's just gone on and on and on and has become an absolute star in that hybrid space. Yeah, phenomenal. And, 90% of all Ubers and taxis are these Prius, amazing cars. And I'm intrigued with all these pieces. And I'm also, at the back of my head, I've got Mike Joy in the back of my head, who is the big push about the greenwashing and so forth. And I'm thinking, so is there any greenwashing that you see with the hydrogen movement? Because it almost sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, look, and nothing's too good to be true, and you always need to look up the lid and have a really good set. We talked about the fact that New Zealand has some really good opportunity because of our high level of renewable power and because of our ability to produce green hydrogen at a really good cost. If we look globally, that isn't the situation for every country that's also trying to build up their hydrogen profile. So you've got hydrogen kind of colours. So you've got grey and blue hydrogen, which is effectively hydrogen that might be created from fossil fuels,
right,
either with or without some kind of carbon sequestration in order to take the edge off. What that does mean is you need to be really careful and mindful of when you're looking at that zero tailpipe emission, what the nature and the profile of the hydrogen, the carbon cost for the fuel that you're consuming. So there is an overall balance, but from what I know and what I understand of other countries, the move is towards increasing the output and the availability for green hydrogen. But you might need some of those other flavours of hydrogen in the mix in order to get you started. and still getting a decarbonisation benefit maybe to an extent, or still getting that benefit of that zero tailpipe emission. So there's lots of opportunities to look at other countries and see that there are other profiles in terms of what that hydrogen
the grey and
production
the blue.
might be. But for us here in New Zealand, we've got a global showcase opportunity. So New Zealand on a world stage is well regarded for our hydrogen industry, and it is an industry. It's an emerging industry. Toyota is a very small part of it. We're talking here today, but there are a number of other players that we've talked about already that are building in this space. We've got a New Zealand Hydrogen Council, which is really active and a good way for us to consolidate an industry voice and have that kind of dialogue for government. And we've got a government that understands that hydrogen's got a place in things and is looking to build up in that way. So certainly within Toyota, other countries look to what we're able to do here, what's happening in New Zealand, as potentially a model for growing an ecosystem. And it's that technology and partnerships. That's the key kind of piece. And that's how, that's how we'll in terms of any aspect of our decarbonisation, we'll only get there if we get there together. And that I think is, for me, about a year in to this kind of work, that for me is very much something that I see in terms of the hydrogen ecosystem and the growing hydrogen industry in New Zealand.
I mean, that's a big claim, because we've got these targets, and we seem to be behind always with these targets. And so this is, I think, the first time I've sat down and talked to anybody thinking this might actually be possible about reaching our targets. Is it 2030 or beyond that we want to be decarbonised?
Well, there's a 2030 target and there's a 2050 target. Transport's only a proportion of that. So transport emissions on the last figures available to us, which are 2023, just simply because of the way we kind of account for carbon. Transport's 18.5% of those emissions. So it's not part of, it's a part of the whole. It's not the only place we can solve these things. Over 60% of those emissions are generated from light passenger vehicles, and 28% from heavy vehicles, from trucks. And we've got a reliance on heavy freight in New Zealand. So about more than 90% of our freight by weight in New Zealand is on the road at some stage. So although heavy freight makes up a small proportion of our overall numbers, we've got a bigger opportunity in terms of decarbonisation. I'll give you an example. So if we've got a truck from Palmerston North to Auckland delivering parts or whatever that might be, it's probably doing around 240 journeys a year. You take weekends and annual holidays and all those kind of things into account. There and back over the course of the year, the carbon cost for that travel will be about 300 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So the opportunity to replace one truck contributes 300 tonnes of CO2 saving. And this is my opportunity to jump in and talk about trucks, which I warned you about. As part of an opportunity supported by ECA with some government funding, TR Group, who are a truck leasing company, and they're probably about 10% of the overall kind of annual truck in New Zealand. TR Group, so they're very much the leader here and also slightly in Australia. They've got a commitment to put 20 hydrogen trucks on the road within the next 12 months or so. And again, working with our friends in Christchurch, GBV, they've selected Toyota fuel cell converted trucks as 12 of those, and they're trying some other options. Hyundai have a product, so they're a player in this space, and there's some other converted trucks that are part of that as well. They're working with Haringa, who are providing the refueling network. So the ecosystem builds. You've got a company like TR Group that have got some values and visions. They're very much part of New Zealand's trucking infrastructure, and they can see the opportunity and the need to be able to make that transition for decarbonisation. So they found a partner, and they found a very willing partner and very capable partner in Haringa, who are providing that refueling network, and another partner that are able to produce and get those trucks on the road for us within a time frame. So that's just a pilot. It's not quite a proof of concept. The first of those trucks is up and driving around now. It was refueling in Palmy, I think, on Monday of this week. And it's another great opportunity, and it's a global opportunity to showcase New Zealand innovation. So that's a 50-tonne truck. Two of Toyota's 85 kilowatt fuel cells, replacing a 13.5 litre diesel engine. And the truck is designed to work to the specification, the OEM specification, the original specification of the truck. So you're really replacing the powertrain and doing that in a clever way. Clever engineers are making that happen. So that's a really good example of that ecosystem building with all of those players, some government support. So Stephen Tyndall's K1W1 Foundation's been part of the mix as well. And there's a really nice ecosystem that builds up. So we were talking earlier about milestones. One of our milestones this year was launching that truck, or TR Group launching that truck to their customers at Hampton Downs. And it was just at the end of March. It was a gorgeous day. We started really early. The mist was kind of rising. Hampton Downs is a great setting. And over 200 customers of TR Group came through that day, experienced that truck, experienced the Hyundai truck, and heard the story. And this is mainstream New Zealand. Yep. It's the big companies, the big freight organisations that are kind of understanding what's happening, and that's all about building the picture for people. And Toyota had a small part at that. We've got a kind of fuel cell that you can kind of look at and poke at, and very capable colleague of mine, Malcolm Lambert, who's a master technician for Toyota, so a highest level of attainment for our technicians, 29 years experience in our dealer network, transitioned over to work for TNZ and become a hydrogen master technician. And that's a really good pathway. I mean, that's he's become our technical expert. He's interfacing with our Toyota hydrogen factory in Japan, with the engineers and supporting our generators and those kind of things as well. So Malcolm did a really good job at a show and tell. And that's it, building the ecosystem, people, technology, partnerships.
I saw recently a contractor down south somewhere with JCB machinery, and saying we're shifting, all our machinery is shifting to hydrogen. And I've seen that 2 or 3 times with people with, trucking companies and so forth going, we are transitioning to this here. It's quite the statement, and people take notice of that. Because these guys, you don't have a contracting business if you're not a petrol head or a diesel head, right? You've got to love engines and all that sort of stuff. And so it's funny, I've taken more notice of them than just about anything else.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure the JCB reference. So JCB in the UK have been working around local regulation in order that hydrogen-powered vehicles can do the job of a JCB, in roading and those kind of things. And they've put quite a bit of investment into that kind of technology. That's combustion technology. I think the company we might be talking about, H.W. Richardson, out of Invercargill. So they've got, contracting and allied concrete and substantial parts of their business that, again, have that diesel profile. They've got a product to market that they've brought to market, which is dual fuel. So it's a different concept to the fuel cell. So it's where you would have a conversion kit, effectively, for your diesel engine, your diesel.
So it's like the old
piece.
old LPG.
Yep, like your concrete mixer.
Yep.
And effectively you have a mix of hydrogen and diesel, maybe a 70-30 mix, so hydrogen would be the 30%. And that will give you a roughly equivalent level of decarbonisation. And that's another great example and another great option. They've done a really good job spreading the word on that and building that up. And that was part of that customer day that I was just talking about at the end of March was that kind of promoting in that kind of space. So the more companies that have that kind of profile, have that vision and values that are coming into that space, the better. And that works really well. So I've learned quite quickly in hydrogen, today's competitors, tomorrow's collaborator, and you'll know that from all your time in business.
Well, it's interesting. I went to a conference recently. It was a food and fibre conference, and the word collaboration must have been used 50 times, and that tells me they're not collaborating. In the ag sector, they're not great collaborators. And so, and there's a whole lot of history around that because it's been so competitive for such a long time. What's been interesting, you've only mentioned the word once today, and yet there is a whole lot of collaboration going on. Because I have this theory that people, when they talk about something a lot, they're not doing it. But if they're doing it, they don't talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it could be a choice of language. It could be that kind of partnership piece. But I've been in the hydrogen role for about a year, picking up projects from about August of last year. Over that time, you need your friends and you need help, and they need your help. And I don't think I've ever picked up the phone to ask someone, one of those kind of businesses we've talked about, can you help me with this? Can I help you with that? And someone said no. There is a real sense of building things together, and that's a really nice opportunity. Whether there's a commercial benefit at the end of that, or whether it's just helping someone out, that's what I've found in this kind of space, and that's been really quite welcome.
That's interesting, Rodger, because I mean, I know where I am today, and I feel very privileged to be at the head office here of Toyota's, and we're talking about hydrogen. And I also know that we're not talking about just Toyota. That's all that sort of comes with the territory, and I don't know why I know that. But it seems to be part of the space that everybody's scrambling to get up to speed and learn as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and there are challenges. Again, we talked about maybe some challenges overseas. Like anything, you've got a hype cycle, and where people see everything that can be done, and the reality might be a little bit different. So there are businesses that have started on a hydrogen path that are no longer in business, and that's something that we'll see maybe overseas in other markets, a little bit impacting on our market here. So at the very early beginning part of something, there is the potential to overstate what the value or the benefit might be, and I'd like to think that from a Toyota perspective, we've got a good long lens on future value, and are quite realistic for ourselves and our partners. We're not at a stage in our hydrogen business where I might say that we've, we're at a stage where we're valuing innovation over commercialisation. So we're finding partners, we're finding projects, finding ways to showcase good things that are happening here in New Zealand on a world stage, and finding opportunities to bring good technology that we see overseas into the market here in New Zealand, and find partners and opportunities for those. We're not making a buck at this point. We're valuing the innovation, the partnerships, the opportunity to find these pathways, and it's testing. It's testing opportunities, and you find yourself tested, and you succeed or you fail. If you fail, what did you learn, and what did you gain anyway? Even if you failed at your objective, what have you gained? If you found a new partner, if you found a new way, you certainly know what not to do the next time you try. So there is an opportunity in this space that you're doing those things. It's almost like that kind of startup mentality, and I know you've got more experience in this space than I do, but it's almost like that startup mentality where you're testing and trying to validate the value in the market with customers and with partners, and do it quite quickly in an iterative way. The worst thing you can do if you're going to fail fast. If you're going to fail over a long period of time, there's a lot of opportunity cost in what you might have done in that, in that time. So we've been quite strategic in choosing the paths and the options that we've taken.
Is there more collaboration because of the need to decarbonise?
That's a good question. I think ultimately, yes. The best example I can give for that is aviation. We haven't talked about aviation yet. So I've kind of focused a bit on heavy freight, but other areas where there are opportunities for hydrogen, definitely in marine. There are some great companies looking to do some great things here in New Zealand in that space. And aviation. So aviation, and particularly international aviation, has quite a high profile as part of our overall carbon emissions. And so that industry is working towards sustainable aviation fuel, whatever that might look like. And some of the things that Air New Zealand and others have looked at is how hydrogen fits into that space. Christchurch Airport, who are, in terms of international ranking, our most highly ranked airport in terms of sustainability in New Zealand. They've got quite a long-term plan. They've built out a solar farm. If you're ever at the airport and you're sitting up looking down over the airfield, you just see the solar farm in the background. And they've provided overcapacity there for what their own needs might be. They've been running some trials using that overcapacity around liquid hydrogen production with an engineering firm, really good engineering firm based in Christchurch called Fabrum. And that's just an example of kind of testing and playing in that space. And that's born of a really genuine sense within that industry towards a decarbonisation objective. So I think the answer is yes. That collaboration around innovation is in part fueled by the need for decarbonisation. And that's part of my personal motivation in being part of this space and what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, because I was just thinking this collaboration, I'm not sure it would have happened around the petrol or diesel engines when they were being developed.
I don't know. That's probably going back to the early 1900s, and I think we're probably quite similar of an age, but I don't think either of us can go back generous. Really that.
No, I was just wondering whether, because the thing is, this need to decarbonise is critical, and it's it's critical. I was just thinking, I wonder if anybody has mentioned to the government whether they pop hydrogen engines into the new ferries that they've ordered. I wonder if that's been the Cookstrait ferries. I wonder if that's been suggested at all.
I don't know if that's been part of the combination, but there are, outside of that option, there are other options around ferries and marine. We've talked about the chase boats up front. That's a really good kind of use case around, in this case, a high performance example. And as I say, there are other companies in New Zealand that are in that space that are looking at what those options are. Wellington Harbour, I think Wellington was the first harbour to have a EV tug boat. And, that's another area in that marine space where we've got lots of different decarbonisation options. And certainly I think hydrogen would be part of the mix there as well, both because you've got those zero tailpipe emissions and also effectively you've got good storage and good ability to carry the hydrogen that you would need in order to do the job that you want your ferry or your boat or your ship to do.
Rodger, let's talk about me. So I've got a car, it's done 300,000 K, and I don't want to replace it until I can replace it with a hydrogen car. And that's a romantic notion. I don't know. I've just had that in my head that this is what I want to. And I'm a greenie, and I know the longer I keep my car, the better. And it's a diesel. It's a 2-litre diesel. And I don't want to go to an EV because at the moment I can't find an EV that would do. I treat my car like a bit of a ute. So it pulls trailers and it's full of sawdust because I use it for my arborist work in the weekend and all that sort of carry on. When could I practically consider the idea that I might be able to find a hydrogen car that I could use and live my life with?
Excellent. I can't give you an exact number of years on the particular example that you had. The arborist bit kind of thought we talked about this before, and I thought I might have had something for you. But so we have got hydrogen vehicles on the road now in New Zealand. The Mirai that were part of that car sharing scheme with City Hop. The thing that will really accelerate our ability to multiply the number of passenger or light commercial vehicles that we've got on the road in New Zealand is building up that refuelling network of 700 bar. Certainly now in Auckland and hopefully quite soon in Palmerston North, be able to offer you a lease on a Mirai, but you'd be able to fill to 350 bar. So that would give you about a 300 kilometre range based on 280 to 300, depending on driving usage. That might not be the car that's best suited for the kind of activity you just talked about there. So what I would say on that is keep watching this space, and I've got your number now, so I'll keep you informed, and I'm sure we'll be able to look after you at some point in the future. But there are studies that have looked at what the uptake on hydrogen vehicles will be. I mean, again, kind of mostly focused around heavy freight. There's a Royal Society study that mapped out towards that 2050 horizon, so that's key point in terms of decarbonisation objective. And kind of model basically the number of hydrogen vehicles on the road for the New Zealand fleet overall would be something between 10,000 and 80,000, depending on what the cost of conversion or the upfront cost of those vehicles would be. And when we're talking about heavy freight, very much that total cost of ownership, the cost of capital, is really important to that industry, that really does know down to the cent how much they're spending per kilometre on diesel and maintenance and those kind of things. And TR Group as a leasing company, they've got that mechanism that can be quite predictable for people that are picking up those vehicles. But the cost of conversion and the cost of capital to invest in that heavy freight is quite important. So another milestone or another interesting thing within the last month, we've now got some certainty that the RUC exemption for EV vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles fall into or can fall into that category. The RUC exemption that's currently in place to the end of this year, we now know that will carry through for those heavy vehicles to July 2027. So that's literally creating some good demand side incentive and subsidy for people to pick those things up. So my crystal ball in terms of what happens in the future, we've got that model that we're certainly talking about tens of thousands of hydrogen vehicles on the road. The number and the acceleration of that number will be dependent on the ability for us to build out that infrastructure. Another important component on that, which we haven't touched on, is the ability of electricity producers to keep pace with the demand that hydrogen production and EV EV battery charging will place on us.
That and AI.
That's a really important component, and then you've got other kind of competing demands on electricity consumption as we go through. So we need to be able to see our electricity consumption is increasing at a rate that supports our ability to displace fossil fuel with a decarbonised option like EV or like hydrogen. We need to see that there continues to be a mechanism by which we can encourage people to make that step, whether it's education. This is a brilliant opportunity for me to talk about hydrogen, but that's one of the things that Toyota New Zealand can add to the conversation. We've got a very, very privileged and respected position in the market in New Zealand. We've got a very good brand reputation, and that's really important to us. So our opportunity to have these kind of conversations, to talk to people, whether it's in industry, whether it's individual consumers, about the options, and to have some, we have some credibility as part of that conversation, and we don't take any of that for granted. I talked about Let's Go Places earlier, and we talked about mobility. That statement for us has been around having a vision, the places we can go. What we're looking to do and what hydrogen and the kind of projects we've talked about today is a really good opportunity for us to kind of turn that vision into action. What are we doing? We've got an opportunity, a truck on the road between Palmerston North to Auckland over the course of a year, 300 tonnes of CO2 saving. The opportunity to work with partners like TR Group, manufacturing partners like GBV, to put more of those trucks on the road, and the opportunity for us to work with producers of hydrogen to give them a market so that they get to a point where they've got commercial viability, and continue to do that, to find friends and partners like Christchurch Airport, like in the marine space, where we can help in some way for that improvement that they can make in those sectors in terms of decarbonisation. And that's part of what the opportunity is.
Rodger, I was just thinking, this is a whole new industry. No, it's not a new industry. But there's a whole new development in an industry. And I was just thinking, for young people going through and getting educated now, or looking to go to university or whatever, what do you say to them if they've got this interest in mobility?
Oh, definitely. I think, and I'm borrowing this from someone else, but young people, and I've got young people, and people need to find their passion. And if your passion's to be an economist, be an economist. If your passion's to be an engineer, be an engineer. But if I was starting again, put environmental in front of it, become an environmental economist, become an environmental engineer, or put hydrogen in front of it, become a hydrogen engineer. And we're really blessed in New Zealand. We've got some really good universities, University of Otago, University of Canterbury, particularly come to mind that have a key role in the hydrogen ecosystem, either in terms of research or in terms of their engineering programs, which place students and graduates out into the kind of companies that we've talked about already. So if I was looking at, if I was talking to someone about what these opportunities and pathways are, be attuned to where the future is going. Just even here in Palmerston North, there's a school down the road, Freiburg School, who were part of a global competition around hydrogen-powered remote-controlled cars, and they took a team to the States and did really well in that space. So there's opportunities at all levels of education to get involved and to get interested in those things coming up. So that to me, I think is something that is something that we can help foster.
We've got a one of our facilitators, John Lazenby, is doing his PhD at the moment on leadership, but it's around leadership in this time and being a leader in climate. So, yes, being a CEO of a company, but having that ability to understand what impact the company is having on the environment.
Yep.
And he's at the very beginning of this, and I'm looking forward to interviewing him with this podcast at some point. But at the moment, the more he gets into it, the more it's stretching his brain, and the start line seems to be further and further away. I don't think he's started yet, still framing it up, but it's a big, big subject.
Absolutely. And companies operate with social license within the market they serve. And if you don't have that kind of vision and values base backed up with action to deliver on what people need or care about, or what the country, your country needs and cares about, then you're not really doing the best job you could be doing. Very much so. I mean, that opportunity to decarbonise, to provide people with solutions for mobility, heavy freight. Your option. I'm going to find a solution for you, I'm sure. I don't know how long, but we will.
2050 is a little bit too far out for me.
I know I went to 2050 in my answer for that question, but I'm confident we'll do it within a practical timescale. But if you're not able to service that kind of obligation as a company, as an organisation, then you're not showing leadership. So I'd always interested to listen to your podcasts, and I look forward to one with Dr. Lazenby.
Yes.
Look forward to that. There's a plug for next time.
There we go. So, Rodger, how did you get to be here? And we've left this to the end because we wanted to go straight to the hydrogen. How did you get here?
Energy, enthusiasm, and experience, I think, in terms of my current role. So I fumbled the numbers when we were talking earlier, but I've been at Toyota New Zealand for almost as long as I've been in New Zealand. So originally come from the UK and met my wonderful wife Sarah in Edinburgh, where we both lived. and then came to New Zealand in 2003. Very quickly, kind of looked around at what the landscape was in Palmerston North, and Toyota in the head office function, the National Customer Centre, on the doorstep, got a job and started here. And that's been a really good opportunity for me, not least because it means that I'm centred in the Manawatu. I come from a kind of small place, not dissimilar to Palmerston North or Fielding, and it's easy to feel at home here. And it's been easy for me to feel at home with Toyota. I started in our customer dialogue centre. So for the first year, I was on the phone, kind of taking calls, and that was something I was doing, and I didn't think I'd be doing it forever. But then moved within Toyota to a job looking after, within that same area, but looking after our customer information, market research and customer insights. And that really fueled my understanding of Toyota's business, but also New Zealand. I really learned about New Zealand through the lens of being here as part of that company. So Toyota operates a rotational system, particularly for people that it might call a generalist. And so I've been fortunate after about maybe 5 years in that initial role and building up my base of knowledge, I've been able to rotate around a number of different areas of the company. Marketing, PR. I then made the natural move from that role into IT project management and spent 6 years kind of working around a succession of system replacements to set us up for the future. And then back into a customer-focused role. And most recently, I was manager for customer experience, which is, as you imagine, quite a broad position within Toyota New Zealand. And then about a year ago, after some good conversation, came into the hydrogen role. And that's where I say it's been a combination of that experience, 20 years experience at Toyota, so understanding our business, understanding those different components, systems, the public-facing aspects, the importance of customer and customer focus, energy, because I've still got a lot of energy and appetite to get things done, and enthusiasm. So the enthusiasm to make a contribution, like we were talking about, in terms of young people and looking at what their opportunities are. At any stage in life, you can look at what's ahead of you and say, what's my opportunity to make a difference in the next X number of years, in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years? And that led me to this role and to what I'm able to do here as a very small part. We're a small team as part of the hydrogen team within Toyota New Zealand. And so my objective is to make us a bigger team by finding us all those champions and people in other parts of the business that are able to help and support. And that's, like we talked about, the ecosystem for the hydrogen industry. That's been very much my experience over the last year, whether it's parts or legal or finance or marketing. We're really kind of building an ecosystem to support our hydrogen customers here for Toyota New Zealand. So that's my kind of journey. Hopefully not in too many words.
Rodger, what are you?
I think I'm probably at heart a project manager. I think if I look at the common threads, and then I struggle between am I a generalist or a specialist, definitely becoming a specialist in hydrogen. And that's part of that transition from generalist across different areas of the business to specialise in hydrogen. And that's my path now. But at heart, I'm a project manager. And you can't manage projects unless you can work with people. So whether it's been marketing or press launches or big multi-year IT project management and system rollout, you're really managing an outcome or leading an outcome, and leading and working on and being led within that with people in order to get to somewhere. So I think if I was putting a label on, if I was really being pinned down, your eyes tell me you're pinning me down, I'd say at heart I'm a project manager. And program managers just managing a succession of projects and overseeing, putting some oversight and governance and structure around a succession of projects as we go through, as they go through.
Because this does feel like a project for you, but it's also a project you're really passionate about. What's at the heart of that passion?
I don't want to lapse into cliche, but I think you do want to leave the world in a better place. Or you look at your children, look at the opportunities that I've had. I grew up in the UK, relatively small town in the southwest. Went to a couple of different universities, had some really good opportunities, particularly living in Scotland before I came here to New Zealand. And you've got that kind of journey and progression, and it's the opportunity to make a difference for the people around you, to make a difference for the people ahead of you, and that might be a bit of a cliche, Harv. I think it probably is, but that's the place I come from, and that's what I want to be able to do. You get a lot of personal benefit if you're doing that as well. You can take, you can take joy or pleasure in seeing something you've done come to fruition, seeing the impact that something has on other people. It's not a kind of completely altruistic kind of not a completely altruistic kind of mechanism either. If I'm making the world a better place, if I'm making things or making a situation better for other people, it's probably better for me along the way, and that's a good thing. So that's my motivation, or at least putting me on the spot at a moment's notice. That's where I went to first.
It's an acceptable answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to jump right back to the beginning. You talked about one of the cheapest sources of hydrogen in the world being produced just down the road here. Yeah?
Yes.
So what we have, and we've talked about less carbon and so forth, the cost of running these hydrogen vehicles, how does that equate to what we've got here? And because what's interesting, my wife is now onto his second EV, and it's remarkable, the cost saving compared to what she ran before. And she ran an economic car before, but the saving is just dramatic. So running a hydrogen vehicle, how does it relate in New Zealand to an equivalent diesel?
So kind of some of, I suppose, the nuts and bolts. So you buy your hydrogen by the kg. So you'll buy hydrogen, it's a gas, and it comes out of the pump, the nozzle, as a gas into the tanks within your vehicle. But your quantity is the kg. So a vehicle like a Mirai, the Toyota passenger vehicle, will have 5.8 kg kind of capacity at that 700 bar. So you're pretty much filling up 6 kg of hydrogen, and at that full capacity, that might be about $180 in order to do that, and that'll give you up to maybe 600 kilometres range. So you'll compare it at that highest level. So your comparison for fuel consumption and total cost of ownership, if I go to a truck now, your hydrogen costs will be higher than your diesel costs, which is why that RUC exemption is so important, to give people confidence to get in terms of total cost of ownership. So hydrogen can be a more expensive fuel, And certainly when you're looking at comparison with diesel, say for generators, trucks, for those kind of things, that is part of the equation. You look, the other parts of the equation might be around the CO2 savings that you're able to make and how you factor that in. We haven't really touched on this, but we're not very good in New Zealand at pricing in carbon. We've got the emission trading scheme, and there is a component of that which is part of diesel when you purchase your rucks. That has a component that kind of works on the basis of what the carbon cost of that diesel usage might be. So there is a version of the future that has a more adequate pricing of carbon within New Zealand, so that the benefit you get from the carbon saving for an energy storage source like hydrogen is better priced in, so you've got a fairer comparison. So I'm not a politician, but I've answered your question maybe in a slightly oblique way. Your upfront cost or your cost at the pump might be different for hydrogen. It's putting, like you do in terms of your EV purchase, it's putting the premium on the carbon saving that you're able to make, putting the value on that. And that's obviously valuable to you and your wife as consumers in that space. And there is a future in which we do that better through those kind of mechanisms. And again, I'm not an economist and I'm not an environmental economist, but that feels like a way forward for us.
But it's interesting because a lot of the time we do not factor in the real cost of producing something when you look at the environmental and the real cost of producing things. And somebody's paid for it, and often it's the climate or the planet has paid for it. But we haven't actually paid for the real cost of that product.
Absolutely, and so again, as part of as part of mechanisms for that, and you think about circular economy and reuse of components. So we've got now a tire-wise levy, which is a payment that you make that basically funds part of the end of life process towards tyres, and you've got that in other components. Batteries is an area that gets a lot of focus, and certainly having worked in this area for a number of years, when we go out and survey customers, around our sustainability activity, or something like that, those are the kind of things that people do place value on and are interested in hearing about how companies are doing that. So you're absolutely right. You've got to look at the whole thing, and you've got to look at the whole thing for the whole life of the thing. And that's that circular economy piece, which is A, so important, and B, probably something that we're only really beginning to talk properly about now at scale, and do it in that way. And bringing it back to one of our earlier parts of the conversation. Turapaki Trust are a really good example. They've got a really nice circular economy model. They're producing power. They've got a dairy farm. They've got a hydrogen truck that they use to service that one of those dual fuel ones we talked about. That they use to service their factory, the dairy factory, and they've got that long-term perspective of what a circular economy looks like. And again, how does hydrogen fit into that and that long-term stewardship? So there's lots of lessons we can take from those things and then apply to the world around us.
Rodger, we're going to get kicked out of this room soon. Before I wind up, I'm going to book you in for 2 years, 3 years, another podcast, because stuff's happening here, and I'm absolutely genuine with this, going, let's go again in a couple of years' time and see where you've got to, because this space is developing so quickly. And I'm just reflecting on when I worked with Turapaki and how far they've come in such a short time. And you could tell 25 years ago that they're on a mission to do this circular economy, and they were going very, very slowly then. And it's interesting to see how because I've kept up with this project is new. I wasn't aware of this, but just how it's gathered momentum, and I have a funny feeling this hydrogen program is going to pick up momentum too. Yeah. What have we missed out, Rodger?
I think we've covered quite a lot. I think if I was looking to summarise where we're at, hydrogen is a thing, it's happening, and that was our entry point. It's a good opportunity alongside other options for decarbonisation in New Zealand. Tied in New Zealand, and part of my role is making sure that we can be part of that and getting the benefit of technology that's being developed overseas and combining it with engineering that's happening here in New Zealand. So we're in a very strong position to capitalise with our renewable energy, our engineering innovation, with partners like some of the ones we've mentioned alongside Toyota, in order to grow our hydrogen ecosystem, increase our decarbonisation, and be a showcase for the rest of the world. This is how it can be done from a small scale applied to a larger scale. So if I was encapsulating where our conversation, which has gone in lots of wonderful directions, and you've done that really nicely, and I thank you for that. That's really what I think we're looking to do. How can New Zealand be a showcase for the world, creating an ecosystem around hydrogen and decarbonisation alongside other options for our mobility in marine, in aviation, in heavy freight?
Rodger, I'm all about that. That's been the highlight for me today, is to learn about this natural collaboration that's going on, and nobody's forcing it and just stepping into the space. And that's been my highlight today, to know that it's happening for this very, very good reason. So not good luck, you don't need that, but keep up the good work, and let's talk again in 2027 and catch up and see where we've got to then.
Very good. Book me in, Harv. Book me in. Thank you.